Most lawsuits start with one person and one injury. But in the biggest drug and device cases, that one story can be multiplied by tens of thousands of people who were hurt in the same way by the same product.
That's where multidistrict litigations, or MDLs, come in. It's how the system tries to handle massive waves of similar cases. For example, people with cancer after using Roundup, women injured by transvaginal mesh or talc, and patients harmed by drugs like Vioxx, Actos, or Xarelto.
In this episode of Big Pharma Behind the Scenes, we're looking at record settlements, how MDLs move the needle. We focus on the mass injury cases that forced companies to come to the table and, in some cases, change their products or even force them off the market. I'm Terry Turner, senior writer at Drugwatch.
And I'm Whitney Bona, attorney and consumer safety advocate with Drugwatch. I'll help explain how MDLs work as we explore how they bring justice and help regulate the companies blamed for product injuries.
In MDLs, individual cases are gathered in a single federal court for pretrial proceedings. The judge oversees discovery, bellwether trials, a kind of test trial, and often global settlement talks. And the numbers that come out of those deals, $10 billion here, $6 billion there, aren't just about money. They tell us how big the harm was, how hard companies fought, and how much it finally cost to resolve the damage.
Taken together, the biggest drug and device MDLs have likely driven more than $45 billion in settlements and global deals since the mid-2000s, once you account for confidential and undisclosed amounts. That's a lot of regulation by lawsuit.
In the last episode, we saw how government enforcement and whistleblowers can expose company misconduct. But when the harm lands on individual patients, one prescription, one device at a time, the path to accountability often runs through MDLs. So what do those cases look like when you add them up? Let's walk through 9 of the biggest MDLs on record. Note that settlements typically include disclaimers that companies are not admitting to any wrongdoing.
Number 1, Roundup by Bayer, over $10 billion. Not a pharmaceutical product, but made by a pharmaceutical company, Bayer faces tens of thousands of cancer claims. It settled most U.S. cases in 2020 and proposed an additional $7.25 billion in 2026 for remaining non-Hodgkin lymphoma suits.
Number 2, transvaginal mesh. 7 different companies paid $8+ billion to settle thousands of cases. Women claimed erosion, chronic pain, infections, and repeat surgeries. Big jury verdicts forced global deals.
Number 3, talcum powder by Johnson & Johnson. The company has proposed roughly $9 billion in settlements multiple times through bankruptcy maneuvers that courts keep rejecting. Women claim the company's talc caused ovarian cancer and mesothelioma.
Number 4, Vioxx by Merck, $4.85 billion. There were 27,000 heart attacks or stroke lawsuits settled in 2007 after internal documents showed undisclosed cardiovascular risks.
Number 5, Actos by Takeda, up to $2.4 billion spread over 9,000 bladder cancer claims. Big bellwether trial verdicts drove the global MDL deal in 2015.
Number 6, Zantac by GSK, $2.2 billion. The company settled 80,000 lawsuits after cancer-causing NDMA contamination was found in 2019. GSK pulled Zantac from the market. Now it's back with a new formula.
Number 7, hernia mesh by Bard, now BD, over $1 billion. The company faced 38,000 claims of mesh failure, infections, and repeat surgeries.
Number 8, Risperdal by Johnson & Johnson, about $800 million in the settlement. J&J faced 9,000 cases of breast enlargement in boys who used the antipsychotic drug. The settlement followed billion-dollar verdicts in jury trials.
Number 9, Xarelto by Bayer and Janssen, a Johnson & Johnson company, $775 million. The drug was named in 25,000 bleeding injury lawsuits.
You can see more details about these cases at the companion article to this podcast on drugwatch.com. The link is in this episode's description.
Put together, these cases show how ordinary people, from gardeners to women recovering from surgery and patients on everyday medications, turned individual injuries into some of the largest civil resolutions in pharmaceutical and device history.
These types of cases can lead to product withdrawals, label changes, new warnings, or shifts in how companies test and monitor safety. They also surface information through discovery and trial testimony that regulators and doctors might never have seen otherwise.
To see how MDLs can uniquely serve public health, we spoke with Nora Freeman Engstrom, a Stanford law professor who teaches about mass torts. Engstrom uses Vioxx as the classic example of a garden variety drug MDL that exposed game-changing information.
Vioxx was a prescription painkiller that was ultimately taken by some 20 million Americans. In the early 2000s, it was seen as kind of a super aspirin, that it was going to relieve pain, but without the negative gastrointestinal effects of something like Aleve, which is naproxen. So 20 million people take Vioxx, and then bad news starts to do a drip, drip, drip coming out. And ultimately, it becomes clear that taking Vioxx substantially increases your risk of heart attacks, strokes, and sudden death. So an MDL is formed. I teach it to my students at Stanford, where I teach, as the kind of model mass tort. So an MDL is formed in New Orleans in front of Judge Fallon. And just like what I've been talking about, documents start seeping out. One document that plaintiffs unearthed is called Dodgeball Vioxx, how Merck trained its sales representatives to tamp down cardiologists and others' fears that Vioxx caused cardiac events, even as their internal documents were suggesting their recognition that Vioxx caused cardiac harm. And so this internal story of saying that there's a problem with Vioxx, that it causes heart problems, and at the same time, folks are being trained to tell doctors that it doesn't cause heart problems, it's really problematic. That's a hard pill to swallow.
That Dodgeball Vioxx document, showing Merck sales reps trained to downplay heart risks while internally acknowledging them, is exactly the kind of revelation only an MDL's coordinated discovery can surface.
As Professor Engstrom showed, MDLs don't just pull cases. They pull damning evidence like Dodgeball Vioxx that forces companies to confront their own contradictions, often triggering FDA changes even after products leave the market.
So, Whitney, when you look at these record MDLs, what stands out to you from an attorney's perspective?
One thing that really stands out about MDLs is how they concentrate both risk and information. So instead of a company fighting thousands of separate lawsuits all over the country, everything gets pulled into one court. And that means coordinated discovery, bellwether trials, and one judge who gets to see the full picture. They get to see the pattern of injuries, the internal emails, the decision making. And that kind of pressure is often what makes these billion-dollar settlements possible. MDLs also create a public record. So you're going to get expert reports, internal company documents, sworn testimony. And even if the final settlements are confidential, the road to getting those settlements often exposes how a product was designed, tested, marketed, and even monitored. So that information doesn't just matter for the case, it can influence regulators, doctors, and future juries. But with all of that said, MDLs aren't perfect. Critics say they can move too slowly. A lot of people feel that the process lacks transparency. Others worry that global settlements kind of prioritize efficiency over individual stories and individual justice. So the real challenge is making sure that MDLs stay strong enough to hold powerful companies accountable while also keeping patients, the people who are actually harmed, at the center of the process.
And that brings us to our final episode in the series, where we'll ask whether the system can be fixed and what real reform would look like if we took everything we've learned about Big Pharma's playbooks seriously.
Next time, we'll look at proposed solutions, accountability measures, and policy ideas that could make safety non-negotiable instead of optional.
You've been listening to Big Pharma Behind the Scenes from Drugwatch. If you found this episode helpful, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and visit drugwatch.com for more on dangerous drugs, defective medical devices, and ongoing lawsuits.